Good morning, Merle.
Good morning.
Oh,
How are you?
good, good. How's everything?
Oh, good. Been a crazy week, but it's good.
Oh, it's been an insane week.
Well, my cousin died on Tuesday night.
Oh my.
And whoops, wait a minute. I'll get you back in a minute. And today is my brother-in-law's yahrzeit, so not exactly easy. He died too young and shouldn't have died, but we're dealing with it.
Oh, when did he die?
It's been 13 years, but it was a lot of hospital and medical issues, a lot of hospital and doctor issues.
Well, he died way too, if it was 13 years ago, he died way too young.
Yeah, it was 47.
Mm.
But there's a lot to the story, and it's very disturbing. And what are you going to do?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Two hospitals and a care facility that actually basically ignored him,
Shit.
and it caused his death. That's the best way I can describe it.
This has been a weird week for me also. Um, Not difficult. My daughter had to go in Chicago. He had to go in for emergency uh, into the emergency room in Highland Park. She had gallbladder stones that had to be removed surgically, and they ended up taking her gallbladder, which is good. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's done, and of course they kept her overnight. Yeah, she's still in the hospital. She may have left this morning. I haven't heard yet from her
Hard.
partner. But I try to leave them alone. You know,
Yeah, you don't want to drive them crazy, but at the same time, you just hope they're okay.
oh yeah, no, she should be, because I've gone through enough of, especially dealing with her partner, because you, I was a caregiver long enough years to know how difficult it can be to be a caregiver. Uh,
Right,
that when Randy was suffering from cancer years and years ago,
right.
recovering, um, I found that, and I tell this to everyone who's a caregiver now, that probably the most difficult thing about being a caregiver is the first thing that happens is that someone sees you and says, "Hey, how's Randy?" No one says, "How's Barry?"
Nobody thinks about the person that's the caregiver.
Right.
Been there, done that.
So
Very difficult.
I make it a point whenever I see somebody or with somebody who's caregiving, I tend to focus on the caregiver rather than the patient.
Well, they in some ways they need equal, if not more, attention.
You know, I used to say, because I learned this because I belong to a group that for caregivers, and the thing that became very very difficult, and I would explain this to people, when Randy was going through her lung cancer and recovery, I was having tremendous shoulder problems, and I would say, how can I complain about my shoulder when she just had her lung removed?
Exactly.
But anyway, you look beautiful.
Not yet.
Nice job, Felix.
You look
Hey,
beautiful.
wait till you see me in a couple minutes.
Okay. What product are you using in your hair?
Shampoo.
Shampoo? Okay.
That's good to know.
Suave.
It looks
Suave.
suave. Well,
Suave.
that's appropriate because you are suave.
That's right. They named it after you.
Did you, by any chance, pick up have the dinner from the Chabad Friday?
No.
No.
They gotta they should Connie should concentrate on chicken, not brisket.
Oh, Nishgut?
Well, it was the was it the bottom? What I never can remember. Is the bottom cut that's fatty and the top cut that is lean?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Sharon would know. Well, this was the fatty.
Sharon would know.
This was the fatty part. So,
Oh, yeah. So it was too much fat.
oh yeah, way too much. Because I like lean brisket.
Well, yeah, it's has a better flavor.
Yeah, and it's healthier and all that.
Healthier for sure. Yeah. I don't know about the flavor. You
We've
need
had
a
a lot
little
of
fat. You need a little fat for flavor.
You know, the littler the better. Okay.
you don't need enough to cause a heart attack.
You,
No, no,
you,
no.
you want enough for flavor, but not enough that you have to cut it away. Okay.
You know, there are three classes of meat eaters, right? Vegetarians, carnivores, and fat eaters.
Oh.
Those are interesting 4 words to come in on.
You missed the rest of the discussion.
Chabad apparently had some kind of brisket dinner Friday night,
Yeah.
and
It
Barry
was the fat part. It was way for me. It was way too fatty for my taste.
Barry didn't like it.
What was the rest of the dinner?
Well, they had latkes, of course, and
Right.
and a veggie and a donut, and of course a challah roll, and
You didn't eat it there, did you? You but
no,
picked
no,
it
no.
up?
You pick it up.
Right.
Oh, you pick it up
Yeah,
like curbside? You mean?
I've sort of been for the last year or so. I've been a minor patron of the Chabad.
Yes. Yeah.
I know you and Sharon were very active when
We were active with SOS.
Yeah.
And try to still be, but it's very hard now.
I find I concentrate on the easy part of being active, which is called writing a check. Okay.
Yeah. That's all too easy.
Well, in today's environment and society, it's
That's
really
all you can do now.
hard to do much more.
No, but you should be ashamed. Look ashamed.
Say again.
Look ashamed. I'm pulling your leg.
You know what? Go back and
The
comb your
easy
hair
part.
some
It's a very important part. It allows them to do their work and not have to worry about their own, feeding their own families, let alone the community. I mean, I always think about both the community and the rabbis and their families.
By the way, Barry, you and Donna came in late. You missed Felix doing some morning grooming.
He's done a fine job.
Yeah,
Barry needs
Yeah,
some.
there he goes.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Actually, that is great style, Felix. I really like the style.
Good
Hey,
job,
you-
Felix.
He needs it.
No,
We're glad to see you're taking care of yourself.
no, Felix, those of us who are blessed with still having our hair always have to take abuse from the others. Okay.
Absolutely. You know what? It also, do you get up every morning and thank your grandfather?
My grandfather, well, I only knew one of them, and the one I knew was bald. So I never knew my fraternal grandfather. He must have had a head of hair.
I don't remember my paternal in terms of hair, but my mother's, it was thinning a bit, but that was fine.
In fact, my maternal grandfather had hair everywhere but his head. I mean,
Okay.
he was one of those-
my hair comes from my grandmother.
My hair comes from all of my grandparents and my parents and everyone else.
I remember the barber I was using when I turned 50. I decided I would not be a person who used comb overs. So I started combing my hair straight back. And my guy said to me, you don't have to bother, Barry. Once you're 50, whatever you have when you're 50 is what you have for the rest of your life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was right. He was right. I mean, I really, I had a relatively full head of hair then, and I do to this day.
I'll be back in a second. I have to reconnect to the Wi-Fi to get on the big screen. I'll be right back. Donna's here.
Are you sure you aren't going to comb your hair?
Oh.
I'm here.
Grooming session.
Where's everybody else?
It's early yet. It's early.
Still early.
Yes, still early.
Felix,
Yes.
you may or may not remember. You bet me our street name wouldn't change.
Yeah. I
You
have
owe
a
me
vague.
25 cents next time I see you.
What?
You owe me 25 cents next time I see you. It's official.
Well, it is official?
Uh-huh.
Where's the picture? We need photographic proof.
I don't know when the signs are going up, but the city told us it's March 1st that it's official.
Can you get the old sign?
I was wondering about that. I was gonna try.
Dave,
Try.
can you prove that it was legitimate and that the Russians didn't actually interfere with that voting?
I have a video of the city council meeting.
A video? Yeah.
Yeah, they put their videos up. I went to what do you call it? Streamed into the city council meeting.
I heard there's a new group being formed called Confederate Lives Matter.
Oh, Lord.
And they would be interested in the street sign.
Yeah.
They
So
might.
what's
My
the new
boss thought I
name?
should auction them off.
Marcy, what's the new
Yes.
name?
Desert Cactus.
Desert? No, for a name like that, you don't get 25 cents. I'm sorry.
Hey, I picked it. I actually submitted that name.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then you should get some
You
kind
should
of
get
prize from the
you should
city
get 50
council.
You should get 50 cents. If
Yeah, really. I submitted 11 names. 3 of them actually made it to the final list, and that's the one that got voted on. So what can I say?
Good job.
That's where you use 2 words when all you needed was 1.
You're an
I tried to
important
keep,
part of your neighborhood.
I'm sorry? I missed somebody. in
No, I
there.
said you're an important part of your neighborhood.
I don't think anybody else on the street knows. That's fine. Well, when they voted on it, it was a YouTube stream. So I stuck in the YouTube chat, oh, look, they picked my name, but nobody answered me.
No respect, Marcy.
No,
No
not at
respect.
all. I have to go find the handouts for today. I forgot about
Okay.
those.
So
You
what
guys
is it?
now-
Desert Cactus Lane or street?
I
Street?
think they're keeping street, like it's East Robert E. Lee Street, and I think they're keeping it as East Desert Cactus Street, which is kind of not, doesn't roll off your tongue or anything.
Well,
but-
but
It
thank
it
God,
doesn't even roll off my mind. Never
thank God
mind.
they have
Well, you
respect
should have
for-
seen some of the choices were actually, and I kid you not, I can show you the whole list. Neutral Street, James Kirk Street, Harriet Street, Buffalo Soldier Street. And like I said to the rabbi, I'm not disparaging Buffalo Soldier, but I didn't want to spend the next 25 years explaining that one. We've
No,
had
I
to
mean-
explain who Robert E. Lee is.
I'm going to try to be at least 50% serious, which is more than I usually am. So I think it should be Desert Cactus Trail, not street.
Whoa, that's very nice.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I
we're
think-
we're
Right?
already a
Am I
street
right?
name. I asked that. There were
Does
already
that
a
roll a
street-
little bit better?
Yes.
yeah, but now they have to
They
go
won't- they
back and
won't,
vote again.
You know, Marcy,
Whatever.
I really admire your sneakiness. You put desert cactus, but I know you were thinking damn council.
Probably.
I think,
Yes.
I also picked, I was trying to think of street names from like where I grew up that might fit. So like I figured, okay, we're at the bottom of like the foothill. So North Hills I picked, that made it. Edge Hill, which is a street where I grew up, that made it.
What was the name of the street that you grew up?
Well, it's not the street I grew up on. I grew up on Patton Road. I wasn't going to pick that one. But there was an Edge Hill Road and a North Hills Road near, I grew up in a World War II environment, development. You know, Patton, Churchill, Hull. I wasn't going to pick any of those.
Yes.
I figured one war to another. But I was trying to
Samville.
think of things that were simple. So North Hills, Edge Hill. I looked at Raven, I looked at Hawk, I looked at Falcon. I was trying to think of some things that were simple.
Vulture, should have been Vulture.
I think that one had already been used. Something Vulture had been used. And actually I looked at I went into the county assessor's website to make sure that the names hadn't been used. And they still knocked out 8 of my names as being too close to something else. So I'm surprised Desert Cactus got in. That seems pretty close to other stuff.
Yeah,
It's an
Marcy, that's
interesting
almost.
picture of
Anyone
Terry.
have interesting names of streets that they grew up on?
I grew up on rural Route 3.
Very good.
35th Street.
You had to go to the
I grew
post
up on
office to
Ozark.
get your mail, right?
No,
Grew up
my
on Benedict
Road.
Canyon. You don't want that name either.
8613 Patton Road. I still remember that
Oh my God.
because it was just post World War II that they built our development then.
There she is.
Our
Yeah.
substitute who we're supposed to be nice to.
Oh, no.
You're not supposed
We
to
were
throw
told,
things
we
with
were asked
spitballs
to
at
be
you.
nice to the substitute last week.
That is,
Okay, substitute, do you have your slippers on?
my slippers.
Actually, you look like you're at the, are you at the synagogue?
I am.
Oh,
I'm fully dressed, even shoes.
Oh,
Shoes.
Thanks for sharing.
Hey, you know,
Well, there could be worse things to share.
None of us can fill those shoes.
Whoa. Oh,
boy, that was the royal apple he brought.
okay.
that was
No,
good.
Felix, I've lifted my feet off the floor for that. 'Cause
Hey,
it's
everybody
cold.
show their shoes.
I'm wearing slipper socks, so, and they're gold, so I'm not gonna show or purple or something.
Ari, what street did you grow up on?
Cody Road,
Cody?
CODY.
Yeah.
Why do you ask?
No.
We were going through streets,
The streets you
interesting
grew up
names
on.
of streets that we grew up on.
They're
Uh-huh.
renaming my street.
Marcy
That's where the
Has
conversation
been,
started.
taking hours and hours of our Torah study time with the issue of her street changing its name.
That is funny. What was the name of your street, Marcy?
Robert E. Lee.
Ah, yeah.
Chicago, I spent a lot of time, I lived a lot for many years on a street called Touhy Avenue. And Touhy was very famous in Chicago. He was an alderman that did not go to jail. So it made him a rarity.
Probably a good street. I
How do
grew
you
up on
spell, how do you spell Tui?
Touhy.
Mhm.
Oh, that H-E-Y, okay.
Last night I was, like scrolling through Facebook, and there's a very active CCAR Facebook page. So that's just, Merle knows about this. That's the rabbis in the CCAR, and it's very wonderful. It's very generous. People ask for help, and everybody chimes in. It's really great. So somebody posted that they wanted to teach a class on streets in Jerusalem and why they're named for different famous people. And they said, who has some ideas for what would be interesting to do in this class? And I love it. It's like this great stuff came up, so much good stuff. And you could spend a year looking at who those figures were. And they're also funny, like Rachel Korazim, who said, right here is my favorite corner.
Okay.
Because here's two people that would never have spoken to each other in life. And now they're streets intersect. And there's all kinds of, rabbis and leaders of the Jewish community over the centuries. It's a neat concept. So street names matter.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Jerusalem Post put a book out about that back in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'll have to get that.
it's fascinating.
Was that the book about who the different people were? I once saw a book about the street names in Israel and who the people were.
That may be the same book.
Yeah, it could be. It was very interesting.
Very cool.
Well, we were lost walking down the street in Jerusalem, and Bob never would ask for directions. And I said, this is ridiculous. We don't know where we are. And I stopped this woman coming towards us. And I knew a little bit of Hebrew. And I said to her, Eifo habi recho bialek. And she started to rattle off something. And I said something to her, half Spanish and half in Hebrew. I don't understand muy tov. And she said to me, well, you take the street to the right here and walk 2 blocks down. And Bob began to laugh so hard. Yeah, but I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I did that once too, but the person didn't know English and I shrugged my shoulders, so they just started pointing.
Isn't that interesting though, how close Mui is to Ma'od?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I doubt it's a
So
cognate.
that's not very challenging, I don't think.
Right, it's an easy language. They will pick it up in no time.
Yeah, right.
I flashed in 1981. I flashed my minimal Hebrew skills, looking for Ha'ir Hazakain,
Ha ha ha.
and nobody knew what I was talking about. We walked miles, and that's all I could figure out. And they said that. So finally found someone who spoke enough to understand what I was trying to say,
I
and
would
she had English.
put that together, but it's so zaken is the word for old. It usually refers to a person.
Exactly.
Terry was asking for the old city, but it's called the Ira Atika, which is better translated the ancient city. But yeah, good try.
Good try, but failed. We got there eventually.
Well, the
I
best
failed
street,
miserably in Israel when I was like 22, something like that when I was there. And the first time I got the nerve to use my Hebrew, I asked somebody what time it was. And he said to me in English, sorry, I speak Arabic, I don't speak Hebrew. And I was like, right out of college, I was like mortified.
the best street I ever found, and I've got a photograph of it, is on the east side of inside the old city, is Derek Sheikh Ha Mickey Mosque.
Wow.
You know what? I learned something that I had never. I have to verify this, but there's what they call Lincoln Street, right in the middle of sort of the new city of Jerusalem, which we would call Lincoln, but they call it Lincoln because they see the L in there. And
yeah.
somebody told me that on that Facebook, somebody said that for a while it was actually called Harav Lincoln, the Rabbi Lincoln. So
Okay.
it's true, but I love that concept.
Excuse me a second. My neighbor across the street has decided now is the time to start getting her motorcycle to start. So I'm going to plug in headphones.
All right. Well, I know Owen is checking out and in, but on his way back. But let's go and get started. We're going on a ride today, friends. Ready?
Ready.
Can somebody read to me? I don't even have Genesis open because we're only going to read one line and then we're going somewhere else. Can somebody read to me Genesis 2:10, which I really hope is the next verse.
If it isn't, it is now.
Okay, right.
Genesis 2:10.
Yes.
A river issues from Eden to water the garden, and it then divides and becomes 4 branches.
Perfect. Okay. So those few little words there, a river flows from Eden, are picked up in Kabbalah, in the Zohar. I will tell you, I am not a Zohar scholar. I find Zohar very, very difficult, and I would not define myself as a mystic. However, my very, very dear friend, Melila Hellner Eshed is. She's a teacher of Zohar, and she has written an entire book called A River Flows from Eden.
Oh.
So we're going to look at that very, very famous phrase that really becomes critical to the entire body of the Zohar. We're going to look at a couple of selections from her book by the same name. And before we do that, any questions on that? Any just initial questions, comments on that?
This Bible that I have here said it flows and becomes 4 heads.
Goodbye.
The word heads is so a little bit different, and it sort of connotates not only intelligence, but the head of different families, 4 different families.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and what I would say is that from the biblical text itself, this is probably talking about geography, and this is probably people trying to understand why some areas are watered and some areas aren't, and what is the source of the rivers. And so they're saying a river, remember we're talking about the Garden of Eden, a river flows from Eden, and that creates these very 4 rivers that are our livelihood for our entire society. but the Zohar is going to take it in an entirely different direction. So, I mean, based on that, but deepened in many ways. So we're going to, before we do that, I want to go to a very short piece shared by Rabbi Rick Jacobs, head of the URJ, in 2017. He also is a student of Malila's and Big Malila. And so he has this lovely piece of his biennial talk. If somebody would read that, before we even had the world.
I can read it.
Thanks, Terry.
Before we even had the world, we had water. In just the second sentence of the Torah, we learn that in the earliest hours of time, the presence of God hovered over the surface of the water. It is life itself. Water gives life to our souls. The sages call Torah Be'er Mayim Chayim, a well of living water. It gives life to our societies. The wells were the center of ancient communities, the places where our patriarchs met our matriarchs. It gives life to our very selves. The body, after all, is 2/3 water. Of all elements in nature, none is more essential than water. Of the countless symbols in Jewish life, none is more elemental. But not all water is created equal. Just as God made a distinction between light and dark, between sky and sea, there is a critical difference between standing water and living water. Okay, wait, I have to find you again. There.
Yeah, that way. That way.
It gives life to our societies. No, the wells. Did I say that?
Yeah, start on the second. That with which we wash our hands.
Okay, that with which we wash our hands before eating and wash ourselves in the mikveh, it must come from Mayim Chayim, living water, water that moves and replenishes itself. Why does that matter to us? Because what gives water its power is its vitality. Water is life because it is alive.
Thank you. And I'll welcome any comments, but the only thing I'll say by way of introduction is that I've joined this Talmud study group with some friends in LA, and we happen to be studying rain and when you bless the rain and all this stuff. And it's so dramatic to me that as a desert dweller, I have a deeper understanding of these blessings for rain and the critical, you're like, we're reading it. We're like, oh my God, who cares? Do you say it on the second day or the third day? Do you say it 20 minutes after the service starts or 40 minutes out, blah, 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 blah. But, as people whose life quite literally depends on water, it's clearly critical. And in the ancient world, the way they blessed it and when they were allowed to ask for it and so on and so forth is very much a part of their spiritual lives. So let's go to the Zohar. Let's go to Malila Hellner on the Zohar. Just to recap for everybody, we're focusing on verse 210, which begins with the words, "A river flows from Eden." And that is the name of my dear friend Malila's book on Jewish mysticism. All right, so we are going to go now to my Kindle edition of the book.
Wait, she's good.
Malila?
You.
Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's see. Can I get another reader? And by the way, you can see the first phrase there in the Zohar's unique language of arousal. Now, what she is talking about there is spiritual arousal. They're trying to get the Zohar is written by and written for these study communities that were trying to achieve mystical connection to God. Right. So they believe that through Torah study and through other kinds of practices, a person can individually have this divine, sacred, supernal experience. They mostly believe in studying all night, overnight. They mostly believe in they have these very esoteric understandings of the text, and they believe that you just kind of keep taking it higher and higher and higher till honestly, often to me, it's not recognizable from the text that we started with, but they've got their whole own language. It's societies of men, but I will say there is quite a bit of sexuality, completely heteronormative. I mean, it's really interesting because it is always a male and female coming together, but it's also interesting to note that these studies are happening in these very intimate communities of only men overnight. So draw whatever conclusions you wish to from that, but it's very interesting. So could I get somebody else to read In the Zohar's Unique?
Yeah,
I'll read.
I'm good. In the Zohar's unique language of arousal, specific biblical verses frequently appear, sometimes within a readily apparent context, and sometimes without being required at all for the development of the homily in which they are found. Analysis of the way in which these verses are employed in Zoharic homilies reveals that they have a function beyond the immediate needs of these specific
There it is.
structures.
Did it come, Midrash?
Yes. Top of the page, Barry.
Yeah, top of the page. Wait a minute. In general, where are
No,
we?
yeah, the
No, we're-
specific Midrash. Sorry, I'm flipping through the Kindle here, so it'll just go page to page.
Okay. So a midrash in which they are embedded, or the Zoharic story in which they are inserted. In general, the function of these verses is to signal to readers the transition to a new level of reading and interpreting the Bible's verses, and to arouse them to a state of mystical consciousness. In light of this special function, and because these verses encode a complex signal for the reader, no doubt, I term them code verses. Sometimes the signaling is explicit, while at other times it is extremely condensed, discernible only by the ideal reader, one who is familiar with the whole composition and able to discern its various structures.
Okay, so they're very into sort of revealing the secrets. Only one who understands the secrets. You know, it's a little bit of an elitist society. Okay, so now she's going to talk a little bit. We're going to skip. Yeah, let's keep going. Would somebody else read the verse from Genesis?
I'll read. The verse from Genesis is interpreted in a variety of ways, yet we always find an experiential core. In the Zohar, this river symbolizes the continual flow of the divine plenty within itself and from itself into different worlds. The movement of this flow is also present in those dimensions of reality. Oh gosh, where am I now? Okay.
Top of the page.
Top of the page. Constructed in the image of divinity. The structure of the universe, the erotic and sexual dynamics between man and woman, and the processes of human consciousness. The reflection of this flow in different planes of reality serves a performative function and endeavors to evoke in the consciousness of the Zohar's heroes the reality of the river's flow, and in so doing, in the consciousness of the reader. The Zohar's authors are particularly interested in this verse, as well as in the parallel verse from the book of Daniel, because all their verbs are constructed in the present tense. In other words, the divine flow represented in these verses is not a phenomenon confined to the past, of which only verbal traces remain. The river, rather, issues continuously into reality. Its flow from Eden to the garden never ceases. The river is then the dynamic, eternal dimension continuously bringing life to all existence. It is the existence of the river in the present that enables the Zoharic protagonists to seek to connect with it. The Zohar tells of these endeavors and describes experiences of human contact with the divine river flowing from Eden. This encounter is described as being watered and saturated by the divine river, an experience of plenty and pleasure flowing down on the mystic, bringing blessings to his surroundings.
Okay, let's pause there because there's a lot, and it's going to continue to be very dense. Okay, so what is she saying? What does the Zohar do with this very simple? A river flows from Eden. Okay, that's fine. And as you said, Sarah Lee, and it starts these four rivers, or however we want to consider heads. That's fine. Where do they go with it? What else do they understand that to mean?
I think it's more about the environment, or in addition, I think it's about the environment in which a group of men are studying a small number of words Up all night. Felix, help me out here. Up all night leads
Yeah.
to an encapsulated
Insomniacs.
psychosis.
They're having trouble sleeping, letting go of reality. They cannot just get in touch with what is real. So they have to, you know.
And that has a power of its own. So it multiplies the meaning of the words. And those of us that get the same meaning are members of the same club. And those who don't ain't members of the club.
Question. There's no question that's part of it for them. No question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep on. Good. Go ahead, Terry.
So, yeah, I don't hate actually to be disagreeable, but I'm gonna disagree. I'm gonna disagree.
We know.
Thank you. I immediately responded to the concept that this is not in the past, and that in that spiritual realm, there is something flowing through all people all the time, from the past to the present to the future. And it was just a thought that popped into my head, but it was a visual I couldn't erase while I was listening to it. And I'm not sure where to take it from there, but there's a concept there that's intriguing to me.
So
Well, Terry, what echoed with me was Rami Shapiro, who talks about living water, and that to be living is to be changing.
Uh-huh.
And so I think what resonates with me is this idea of change and abundance, ongoing, eternal, ever changing, that life is ever changing. And this is the part of the reality of God, I guess.
Yeah, I
love that.
Yeah.
While I was listening to this and reading it, I had another thought about, yes, it's living and it's ever changing, but water can also be damaging.
Yes.
And that, Mari can relate to this, as growing up in Los Angeles, I lived in a canyon that they built 100-year flood control project. And we never saw the 100-year flood, except when there was a fire, and 2 weeks later, our whole canyon, Benedict Canyon, was in front of our house, because we lived at the bottom of the canyon, was flowing down this river.
Merle, I'm living in a hotel right now because a flood destroyed my floors. So yeah.
Oh my God! I thought you were remodeling or something.
Yeah. Water.
But I'm looking at it. Yes, it's living and it's ever changing, and it's everything that we've all said. But water can also be destructive or damaging, just like people in our lives, and can be destructive and damaging. So it's a living thing, but it also has the characteristics of humans.
Okay, let's go Kathy, Owen, Felix, and I'm gonna just flip onto raise your hand on my other screen here to see if anybody else would like to speak. Kathy, Owen, Felix, then I want to say something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. What I focused on was the use of the word present with living, because the past can only be described in words, in writing, someone else's view of what happened at that time. The future is speculation. All we really have to call living is this moment, the present. And I love how they described that and linked it to the living waters.
Great, thank you. Owen, go ahead.
So on the second day, the earth is covered in water, but it is salt water. It doesn't say it's salt water, but it's the seas, it's the oceans. Land does not appear for a while. So that's not living water for human beings.
Right.
You can't live in salt water.
Yeah.
So
that's
the rivers that begin to flow or have been flowing, living waters are fresh water, not salt water.
Mm. Yeah, just like in mikveh.
Where do the rivers come from? Don't they come basically?
They're trying to figure
from the
out.
ocean?
That's what they're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
I was
from?
They come
I
from
was
that-
thinking along very similar lines. I was thinking about, you know, sorry, elementary school teacher, evaporation, condensation, you know, the rain cycle.
Yeah.
So you can't completely say that, Owen.
So I
Felix.
yeah,
Okay.
I had very similar thoughts. The way I was thinking of it was that this is basically a warning to support life. We have to be careful what we take into our bodies. So not only can water be very destructive and dangerous as a force of nature, as in a flood, but it can also be dangerous as still water, as water that is not being refreshed, rejuvenated. It can be polluted, it can be poisonous. So we need to be careful that we drink water that is renewed, refreshed, rejuvenated, and the present is what we live in, and so there.
I've had a couple of thoughts here. I know I've read somewhere that in Israel, they're producing water from air. I don't remember exactly, you know, the science always what goes over my head, but they're doing that besides they have these desalination plants. I mean, they have learned to really utilize water. But to go back to what somebody just said before, there's somebody here who's told me this, and she's repeated it many times. The past is history. The future is a mystery. The present is our gift. It's a present.
Yep.
And maybe that's when they are talking about right now, relish where we are right now and use it to the best of our ability.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So the rabbis, hold on just one second, Becca. Okay, so just to be clear, you know, we've got this phrase, I'm looking at it now in the Hebrew, it's 3 words. V'nahar yitzeh me'Eden. Okay, water flows from Eden. They, as some of you have said, they really focus on the fact that it does not say v'nahar yatsa, a river flowed from Eden. So they take that as a cue that we are not talking about plate tectonics that happened 1 billion years ago and created continents, right? They're not telling us a story of the Bible, according to the Zohar, this is not a story on history on the formation of rivers. This is a story about something totally different. When does the water flow from Eden? Always, right now, right this very second.
Yeah.
As many of you have commented, the nature of the living water, the running waters. Some of you, I have been honored to be with you in the mikveh. The tradition is very clear that the mikveh has to be living waters. It has to be, that's why we have if you've been to the one at Beth Israel, that's why we have the bore, the well, and the nishikah, so that there's some fresh water flowing. And when a person becomes Jewish or has another kind of meaningful transition, they need to tap into the living waters that flow right now, this minute from Eden. But then the Zohar also, oh, and by the way, just a quick note on that, as many of you have said before, in my, you know, in different ways and different references, you know, in my days before kids, when I did a lot of camping and backpacking, you always prefer running water, right? You know, you can treat still water, but it's going to be a much better idea to drink the flowing water, right? You can treat that, you need to treat that too, but it's going to be healthier. Okay, so they know something. But then they say that it's not talking about a place, Eden, and a physical river. That flow is God. That is the life force. There is this supernal divinity constantly flowing from Eden through our lives. And our job is to figure out how to tap into it. Our job is to, like, you know, poke a straw so the water comes, you know, so we can drink the water. Now, they have very specific ways that you can do that. This gets back to Owen's idea that for them, it is a little bit of an elitist society. And, if, like, you can join me when you get the code, good luck getting the code, that kind of thing. I'm teasing them a little bit, but they also, for them, it's like very real. They've been studying for years together, and it's a little bit, it's not totally unlike, you all have a little code, right? And what the difference is, you're very, very good at welcoming new people. Let me see some head nods. Yeah, everybody agrees.
Yeah.
Good.
We hope so.
Yes, no, you're wonderful at welcoming new people, but you
That's the plan.
but to give it the best read possible, we know what it's like to sort of have studied together for a long time and be able to sort of come in, not starting, having to explain everything. You know what I'm saying? So that's what they've established for themselves. But the goal of all of that is to tap into this divine, supernal experience that, again, as mystics, that's their goal. That's what they believe can have. That's what they're trying to do, is really basically have an unmediated experience of God, for a person to tap into God directly. So I think Robin wrote something, and then I know Becca wanted to say something. Let me just read this. Maybe the 4 rivers are the arms and the legs. Eden is the head and body and the heart. I love that. I'll tell you, Robin, I do love that. They're going to pick other organs that they like to focus on, but that's another story. Go ahead, Becca.
All right, so actually I was going to say pretty much what you were just saying, in the sense that the river is symbolic of life, but the river is also the giver of life, which is God. And I think implicit in this is this 2-prong warning. To wander too far from the river is to risk that your life cannot continue, especially if you're living in a desert. And to wander too far from God is the same thing, that your life and your soul cannot continue.
Yeah, beautiful. And by the way, to wander away from it, but also mysticism is often perceived as dangerous. So to get too close is also dangerous too. It can be a little radioactive, and that shows up in different ways and different times.
Okay,
but, yeah, go ahead, David, and then we'll maybe go back to the text for
Yeah, my every instinct from the start of this is to send up my contrarian notice, starting with the first rabbi. Who gave him permission to say what was living and what was dead water? Starting with that. And as for the Zohar, the time period that these guys were writing was a time period of exceptional repression of the Jewish people. These guys didn't have movies, TVs, barely any of them had a chance to have any life. The only pleasure they might have got was studying together and have all night BS sessions. Let's be honest about this. Yeah. And when guys are BS sessioning, most of us talk about girls, but these guys coached it in, shall we say, mystic concepts, but it's plain they're talking about girls.
This is why we need more women in every group.
Well, let's go on with this. So between the Spanish repression, between Shabtai V, the Lurianic time period, you've got all sorts of crazy messianic and thoughts flowing around. Anything that might be a little exciting was flowing all over the place. Now,
well, anything that offered hope, anything that offered, even if it was not real.
Terry, even so, at this point in time, to say that this is worthy of reverence, I have a lot of problems with the basis of it. But when we get to the point of saying that we can bring things from it, okay, that you might say the rivers are this, the rivers are that. That's current study. But we have to recognize that a lot of this is nothing more than complete idle speculation about a world to come that we have absolutely no concept or need for. What we need to do is specify more time of what needs to be done in this current world.
Let me jump in for a second. Okay, so David, listen, I'm a skeptic of, I'm not a mystic. So I'm with you there. I can totally go there. However, I think your point is, when we get to what can we take for it, okay, from this. Okay, so we're going to go deeper into the text in just a minute, but we moderns, I think, spend a lot of time trying to think about what God is and how we access God, right? And a lot of the ideas that come from this book, we're very uncomfortable with, right? A lot of the personifications of God and
yeah, very much so.
So here's this other concept. Just go with me for a second. Like there is this flow of goodness and blessing and sacredness, and it's everywhere, and we just have to tap into it. And they define tapping into it as this all-night study stuff, but we might define it differently. Good in the world, having a moment of love, kindness, standing in the Grand Canyon, all that stuff. But it's like they're saying like where is God? Where Avinu Malkeinu, God is the judge. God, we've got all these ideas about God. God is the creator. God is the flow of blessing that is everywhere.
I love
all
that.
we have to do is get ourselves to the
That's
place
great.
of tapping into that.
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful concept to me.
I do too.
Not exactly I'm not using it exactly the way they did. But there's just this abundant flow of God, always flowing, always there, always present. We can't be bathing in the river all the time, but it's always there.
We always go back, whatever happens in our lives, good, bad, or indifferent, we always end up going back to where was God in this in my life.
Right. So maybe those moments, and especially the ones where we would say God would have felt absent to me. Maybe just one way to understand it is that those moments are as far as possible from this divine flowing river. They're out in the desert.
Again, my point is you can't have it both ways. Either God is in the entire world and everywhere, or he's not, or she's not, or
Of
it's
course
not.
you can have it
But
both
if it's not, then what are we talking about?
But weren't these men located in Spot, which is not really desert, but more in the mountains, and it's verdant and it's green up there? And,
Yeah, that's true.
Spain.
So,
Of course you can have it both ways. It's called the flexibility of thought.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
in particular.
Trying to understand complicated things in multiple contexts.
And again, I think actually, if we look at it this way, we look at Genesis a lot, and we look at the stories as we talk about them, and we use them as metaphors. And here we are discussing something in a very concrete way, and that's not necessarily the way we need to be looking at it. We need to be looking at it as a metaphor.
Right.
And if, like everything else, and if it's a metaphor, then it's extraordinarily powerful to me.
Okay, let's go into the text. We're going to read, this is a long passage. We're going to read about 4 or 5 pages, and then we'll break it down. So if you have notes, maybe make notes to yourself if you have a comment you want to share about it. But I just want to get through this one part. So could I get a reader?
Maury, before we move on, could I please share something relative to the living waters that we were just talking about? And you brought up the mikveh. And I'm a convert, and I had the distinct honor and pleasure of working through the final phases of my conversion with Rabbi Mari. And then we went to the mikveh, and the power of those living waters, I felt God flowing through Mari, through myself. With the waters, I felt so embraced by them, and the 7 dunkings, and with the prayers that went along with it. It truly felt like the presence of God, truly one of the most special moments of my life.
Wow.
Very nice.
Thank you for sharing
Very
that.
nice.
Thank you.
An honor to be a part of that. Okay, the Zohar establishes.
Here, I'll read.
Thank you.
The Zohar establishes a special connection between a river flows from Eden to water the garden, and the enlightened will shine like the radiance of the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. That Danny Matt's translation. The Zohar commentary to Exodus begins with a dramatic interpretation of the book's first verse, drawing on both the biblical verses central to the Zohar. The verse from Daniel is, as we saw in chapter 2, the motto of the composition. It encapsulates the deepest desire of the Kabbalists to shine like the radiance of the sky and the stars forever and ever. And in itself is a Zoharic code verse. The river that issues from Eden is not essential to this homily, insofar as the radiance of the sky can be interpreted without the help of the verse from the story of the Garden of Eden. However, according to this interpretation, the radiance of the sky is in fact the river that flows from Eden, sparkling as a stream of light. Thus, this streaming light is
Good.
what radiates from the Kabbalists. There are names of the...
Let me interrupt 1 second. Okay, so Malila's just giving an introduction. They've got these 2 verses that are really critical to their whole understanding of the Torah and of searching for God, and they're kind of going to bring them together. And as Terry said, this is a place to not be overly literal, because we know that there's no river flowing in the sky, but when we look up and see the beautiful stars, we're supposed to understand that as being part of this beautiful supernal river, that they're basically the same thing. Now we're going to go to the verse in Exodus and see how the Kabbalists play with it. Murray, you want to keep reading or you want to pass it along?
No, I'm good.
Great.
These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each man with his household. They came.
Okay, so that's the Exodus verse. Go ahead.
The enlightened will shine like the radiance of the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. The enlightened, those who contemplate the mystery of wisdom, will shine, shining and sparkling with luster of supernal wisdom. Like the radiance, shining and sparkling of the river issuing from Eden, this is the concealed mystery called expanse, in which exist stars, constellations, sun and moon, and all those lamps of light. And then somebody else can read now.
I'll pick up again.
Go ahead.
The verse, "A river flows from Eden," is not cited here in full, but no doubt because the author of this homily assumes that the reader is already familiar with it and its meanings in the Zohar. And in this instance, the function of this verse is to draw connections between the words radiance, light, and river. The radiance, so important to the work that bears this name, is in fact the streaming of the river that flows from Eden. The significance of this appearance of the verse is that it defines a level of reading attuned to the awe-filled experience of gazing at the night sky. This experience is wonderfully expressed in biblical poetry, in particular in Psalm 19, which describes the perfection and beauty of creation, the handiwork of God who can be known through contemplating the heavens. The heroes of the Zohar view the night sky as a book in which they themselves are inscribed. They are the ones who shine like the radiance of the sky and the stars described in the verse, "The enlightened will shine like the radiance of the sky." They view the entire sky as a kind of river, perhaps because of the ever-changing position of the stars. And within this sky, they identify a river of light, the Milky Way, a river that flows from the depth of the sky and pours forth its plenty on the world. Thus, Rabbi Abba explains, who is the expanse illuminating earth? You must admit, this is the river flowing forth from Eden, as is written, a river issues from Eden to water the garden. In the Zohar's commentary to the Torah portion, Teruna, we find a story about Rav Hamnuna Sava that describes a special practice for drawing down a supernal spirit for use by the sages at the start of the Sabbath. In this story, we read of the teaching that Rav Hamnuna Sava would say flows from the depths, would say after emerging from the river in preparation for Sabbath, when he would sit and gaze at the joyous sight of the ministering angels ascending and descending.
Was he on something?
I was just gonna, you and I are on the same wavelength. I was just wondering what they were drinking or smoking all night. Yeah.
All sleep deprived. They're all sleep deprived.
Sleep deprivation, that's what I was thinking, sleep deprivation.
You know, I'm struck by the fact that we have a modern day version of that group, which is the Our Gang comedy series. Remember the name of their clubhouse?
No.
The He-Man Women Hater Club.
Oh.
Right? Is any of you familiar with that? The Our Gang.
No. You're talking about
us guys
Spanky?
Get in the tree. Yes,
You're
exactly.
talking about Spanky? Now, what was the little girl's name in that gang?
But she wasn't able to get into the treehouse.
She wasn't able to get,
Only the cool guys. And
Well,
they'd stay
fuck
up
'em.
all night and talk about the Zohar.
So they were almost certainly smoking something.
And what about alfalfa?
Oh,
What
yeah.
about alfalfa?
Okay, so that's Rav alfalfa to you.
Ha ha ha. But so I actually loved this part, right? That this one rabbi had the ability to bring the river's flow down to the community before Shabbat, right? And how did he do that? He sat out there watching the sun set, contemplating Shabbat. What does it mean that he saw the ministering angels going up and down the ladder? Maybe he saw them, maybe he didn't, maybe he imagined them, maybe they were spiritual, maybe they were metaphorical. But he went outside and he watched the sun go down, and he brought the divine presence for everybody. I thought that was beautiful. I love that.
So coming back to David's point, he's the guy that sat out there and said, I'm doing this. I can do that. See? And all the members of his club said, gee, you're right.
Yeah.
And my final statement on this is back to my original. It's a lot of bull excretion.
It's not. It's another linguistic way of thinking about the things that we all struggle to understand in different ways. The best way to learn something is in context. And if you twist a piece of knowledge one way and then another, you see it differently. And the essence of the knowledge may be the same, but people learn differently and need to hear it and understand it and see it in different contexts.
Maybe, Owen, and I don't disagree with your assessment, but from my point of view, I've seen too many of these mystics, hippies, people who have twisted religious words for evil purposes. I have seen so much crap in the world under the guise of mysticism or enlightened knowledge, or I know something that you need to know. And it just grates me that this is still being allowed, not allowed, that would be too hard, but that we give it so much credit. For the people of that time period, we're still studying a book that sounds like Apple legalese. The only thing it really means is to the writer, and after you do a lot of studying, you'll find out the writer says, I'm right, and that's it.
This is an interesting way of learning something new. We're all here for the same purpose. Nobody's switching a perspective. It's just we're studying.
We're still all trying to figure out what life is about.
I'd like to jump in. This is a fast moving group. I feel like I'm having dinner with my family, where you had to raise your hand to have a conversation at the dinner table. Earlier on,
finish your peas before you talk.
Thank you so much. Actually, I don't want to. So we know that when a river flows, there's some poetic reference that a river, if you step into a river, it's never the same, right? At any point you step into a river and it's changed because the water that was there a minute ago has moved on and new water has come in. So we know that the stepping into the river is going to give you a constantly changing experience. And we've just read that looking at the sky and the ever-changing positions of the stars is what made the author say, it's similar to a river. All of that makes me think about what we've started with, that the river is this great flowing of goodness from God. And if you take those two concepts together, that means that this flowing of goodness from God is constantly changing. So are you with me? Did I earn it with eating my peas? That between the river changing and the position of the stars, that this goodness this flow of energy and goodness and meaning that might be coming from God is constantly changing. Now I'm trying to reconcile this as I move on to my green beans, that the rigidity in so much of Orthodox interpretation. I'm done.
Right. Okay. So you're taking it. I love it. You're taking it a little further than these guys wrote about, but that if it is a flowing river, that there's nothing stagnant about it. There's nothing static about it. So that and we affirm this in our liberal tradition, that revelation is constantly happening, and it's going to be different today than it was yesterday, and it's going to be different tomorrow than it was today. That's beautiful. I love that. Terry.
I just want to defend the people who have the imagination and maybe the right weed to get into that place. I don't care what they had on them, or exhaustion or anything else that might drive them. But I kind of see that these guys were rather unique, because the people on the outside were going to be the people not in that circle. We're going to be heavily burdened with daily life and with the chores of daily life, with the needs, demands of family and community. These people had the freedom. I kind of get excited at the idea that 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, and probably 100,000 years ago, there were people who pushed beyond the literal meaning of things and the literal explanation. And it's true of primitive people all over every culture has these stories. You've heard me say this about 1 million times, but the fact that they all have looked to read meaning into the symbols and the things in their lives,
and
that excites me. That excites me. That makes me very happy that there's that kind of stretching of what appears to be ordinary into something more than ordinary. And I just want to defend the Zoharics or Zoharians or whatever they're called.
So much of what we're doing in this, I think, is looking for metaphors for our
Yes,
lives, right? We're looking
and I totally support metaphors.
Yeah, and one way that I understand this one, in this season in which we're thinking about something of finite volume that lasted longer than expected, I mean, just the abundance. This is a well that is endless. The flow, it's never going to run out.
And the concept that you could tap into that whenever you needed to, wanted to, or were willing to work at it. I think it's kind of exciting.
And multiple religions have found ways of describing that and creating a pathway to do that. And it doesn't matter. It's not about Judaism. It's about the notion that if I have figured out a way to tap into God for me, and I can show you, then you can take it and do what you need to with it. It's not because it's from me. It's because I was the person standing there at the time who said, oh, I figured something out. It's a way of offering hope.
I agree, because I think that's what the whole damn thing is about. All of religion. The only reason it exists is to give people hope in shit times.
Let me, I'll read through this just really quickly. This is just where Melila sort of just like lays out exactly what this verse means as it appears in the Zohar. So she says, our verse as a whole is interpreted as describing a range of processes. The river that flows from Eden to water the garden symbolizes the movement of the entirety of divine reality. I think that supports Becca's point. It's always moving, right?
Can you pause between sentences? I need a little processing time. Just a little pause.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Take a breath. Drink some water.
I will. Indeed, the deepest wish of the Kabbalist is to be exposed to this river, to be influenced by its plenty, and to be watered and immersed in it.
Okay.
Our verse describes the essence of the complex dynamic of the divine consciousness within itself, the expansion of this consciousness from within itself, and the creation of realities outside of itself, as well as their nourishment.
Okay? Yeah, that one
Yeah, what I think that means is let's just say there's God, there's Eden somewhere, there's God somewhere, and it's very complex and flowy, but it also has this important job, which is to flow out to the rest of us, right? So the process of taking God into reality, right? The river flowing from Eden. I think
It's not the river's job. The river is doing it. It's our job to find meaning in it.
Okay, thank you. But the river's sort of nourishing us all the time through that flow. Our verse is elsewhere interpreted as describing the processes of human consciousness constructed in the image of the divine. Again, maybe I'm going to say that supports Becca's point, right? I mean, they didn't mean it this way, but that as our human reasoning and thoughtfulness evolves, we have legitimate access to the stream. And now, because I promised it, our verse also contains symbols of the masculine and the feminine. It describes the eros active in the world in its various modes. Okay, so that's that. On the physiological plane, our verse describes the journey of the sperm from the brain. I don't remember learning that that's where that is.
Whoa!
That's why we have two heads. Keep going. Sorry.
Owen.
I'm from New Jersey. What do you want from me? So are you, Felix.
I can't believe it.
You're from New Jersey.
But of course, that is the source of our replenishment, is our procreation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, does that need to be an idea first? I'm not sure.
Great point, Felix. Thank you. I'll just read this and then we'll.
Okay, that's pretty graphic. Yeah.
In all the different planes of interpretation, we find the same quality of flowing continuously from its source to the place of gathering, which by virtue of the flow is given life. Oops. In the Zohar's interpretation of this verse, we find simultaneous reflections on divine and human consciousness, on divine and human eros, as well as on human physiological processes. The simultaneity. Thank you. Okay, I think we're gonna stop here because we're gonna get really.
Oh, look at all those big words. That was great.
It's neither unequivocal nor equivocal. See if you can figure that one out.
Univocal.
Okay.
Oh,
I think we got the point there. So, any more comments? A river flows through Eden. What do you think?
Fabulous.
I love the concept. And again, Lisa and I are devout Shapiro worshipers. So we relate to these concepts in some different ways. I know Lisa and I particularly latched on to Rami Shapiro's concept.
He's wonderful. I looked a little bit at the midrash, by the way. Particularly, Malila talks about the midrash that forms the basis of what's in the Zohar. But I also looked at just poked around the midrash, and a lot of it is focused on this question of whether Eden and the garden are the same thing. Right? We've always assumed that, right? The Garden of Eden, that's where the whole thing starts. But if you look at the verse itself, a river flows from Eden to water the garden.
Yeah.
So they clearly are very early on in the midrash. There is this concept that Eden is something else. Eden is something other than the garden. Eden is some kind of source.
I'd like to discuss a little bit why water is being focused on so much, rather than, let's say, something like air or wind. Why isn't there a wind that blows in 4 different directions? Why don't we think more in terms of God as the breath of life?
Well,
my thought, like just one more sentence, my thought about answering my own question is, because of our limited human brains, we need something very concrete.
Speak for yourself, Felix.
I will speak for everyone. If you don't like it, it's up to you not to learn.
So wind plays an important role. I mean, I'm thinking back to Ruach Merachefet al Pnei Adama, the wind of God, which is also translated as the Spirit of God, blew over the face of the earth. right? So
Ruach
we do
Elohim.
very much connect, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff about how we translate all the different words. Neshama, to breathe.
Yes.
Oh, and neshama, every living breath praises God, and also it's the same word for soul. So there are other places where divinity is very deeply connected to wind and air and breath. God breathed life, right? Adam was a body basically, and God didn't become a living thing until God breathed life into his nostrils. But I don't disagree that we need something concrete and tangible.
And isn't the Hebrew word for outer space halal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there we have space without oxygen, without air. And I just think there's a lot to learn from this. It's very provocative to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel very provoked.
Again, I also think that the probably in the ancient mind, water was something that they had a clear contrast between what it's like to have it and what it's like not to. Except for, I mean, we've had some recent examples of this when we know that somebody can't breathe, except for when air's access is restricted. But for most of us, most of the time, that's not something that we have to think about, thankfully. But an agricultural society that lives by the land lives or dies by the water on a daily or certainly yearly basis.
Yes, but also another counterpoint is that air is more omnipresent.
Yeah.
Water is more discrete.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, why the bridge of stars connecting to the waters is quite the concept, because it wraps the entire thing. Water's at the bottom, the stars are at the top, and I'm waving my arms, and it's I think it's kind of a awesome concept to play around with.
Yes.
Marcy, did you want to say something?
Because my first reaction to what Felix said is you can see water. Like I could take the picture behind me, but I couldn't take the picture of wind. So for somebody that long ago, maybe they could grab onto what they could see.
That's true.
As opposed to the concepts of that. I'm sorry, Felix?
The photographer should appreciate
But you can see the wind and its effects, and you could take a picture of a tree bending in the wind.
Yes, and
you can infer
wind,
you can't see
the interesting thing about wind too is that it can contain water and it can combine with water to destroy human life, to destroy what humans create. A hurricane, for example, right?
Or even the picture behind me, it looks like a calm, nice waterfall picture, but I was sitting on a rock that went like this. And if I had slipped, and it was very loud, if I had slipped, the water would have killed me. So it looked, water we talked much earlier about the power of water. And I was thinking about how the picture looks versus how it was when I was actually sitting on that rock trying to take that picture. And I was there at the flood of 72 in Pennsylvania, and I saw the damage that water can do. So water is a really pretty concrete concept if you're new to all of this, to me anyway.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, there's some folks we haven't heard much from: Willa, Barry, Kat and Michelle, Ira, Matthew. Anybody want to jump in?
I was just thinking of the water, that it's always the golden mean, it's always moderation, and too much water, too much wind gets to be too much. At the same time, if there's not enough, and as brought up before, these were mainly desert dwellers. Whether we go back to the Torah or these were in Spain, there are parts of Spain that are incredibly arid. They understand the absolute need for water, but how sometimes it can be a problem. But one other thing about water slowly over time changes things. Grand Canyon changed by water over the millennia. So it's the actions of water are quite complex.
Yes, quite.
Well,
And
I
Go
would
ahead.
I keep
add
the,
that over the last week, the Phoenix paper has had a series of articles about the drought on the Indian reservations and how it's, I think that if some of the people who are being affected by that might be interested in our conversation, because they're in a very practical way, they are suffering.
Well, I have to tell you as a side note, I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with anything, but my children are obsessed with a show, with a movie called Zombies, and there's a pack of werewolves, and they all have names that start with W. So Willa. So my son Ezra, every day he says, "Don't call me Ezra, call me Willa," and I always.
Oh, that's funny. And there aren't many of us, except he should say, call me William.
Yeah.
I remember when we had a flood here in the 70s, and we were very concerned. The 19th Avenue was, before they built some kind of dam control up north, it was flowing like a river. And our daughter's bar mitzvah was that weekend, and there were people who were on the other side, could not attend. And we were very concerned. We were looking where we could buy in the desert flood insurance.
Yeah, and then at that time, the bridges were washed out.
Yeah.
Right.
The Salt River, and people who had to get from Phoenix to Tempe or the other way around to work were a mess.
Yeah.
and that was a period where we had 100-year flood every 5 years,
Right.
at least.
And
At
bad,
least.
and I remember trying to get home from McDonald and Scottsdale Road to McDonald and Granite Reef. And fortunately, I knew South Scottsdale till I found a bridge that I could get over. And it took me 5 hours to go less than a mile.
Let's. I want to say something. I want to. Did you want to add something, Ira?
No, I wanted to, and it's also a side note. That definition of 100-year flood doesn't mean once every 100 years. It means every year there's a 1% chance of having a flood. Big difference.
Exactly.
Okay, let's hear from Ira. Go ahead, Ira.
Well, I think it's interesting that wind and water are W's. And also that we need both, but we really need water in order to survive. That seems to be the tangible one. So a wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, David Flax. I promise that's the last time I'll bring you Zohar for a while. But
Thank you.
Oh no,
No, we love Zohar.
No, more.
The problem with me
Warn
is this.
David ahead of time.
Okay.
That's 1901.
Can we get Danny Matt to come teach us Zohar?
I can definitely get you Malila. I don't know about Danny. Maybe. I don't know him, but I know Malila.
We'll take
Malila would be great.
Malila. I've heard her when you brought her here before.
Go ahead, David. Did you want to say something?
The problem, again, gets back to, I guess, how I define reality and metaphors. You can say the term a heart of gold, but no matter how well you shape gold, it's never a living heart. And no one has a heart made out of gold. It's just a way of joining two ideas together. But when you start joining too many ideas together, it becomes, ooh, it sounds great. But tachlis, reality, dealing with day to day. If you're in a helpless situation, it's your way out, that's one thing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that because somebody says there's 4 rivers, that's God's flowing. This kind of thinking is very difficult for me because I don't think I need to worry about whether there's some guy who thinks he's seeing angels coming down out of the sky for my Shabbat. My Shabbat is good irrespective of whatever fever, drug, or mystic dream he has. And a lot of this just does not set well with me.
I totally hear you. I have to go because my kids are outside. I got to go pick them up.
Oh, they're just metaphors.
The only thing I'll say is that,
One is meta, one is for. Okay.
my parents have a loving disagreement about Leonard Cohen. My mom loves Leonard Cohen. My dad has no interest. And I think it all has to do with how they see metaphor. I think that's, that's the difference, is how far they want to take metaphor and how interested in they are. And David, as you know, there's no right or wrong answer. These are personal matters. Okay,
It's
friends.
only balance.
Thank you for
Thank you,
teaching
Rabbi.
us.
Balance.
My great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful.
Great.
Let's try to connect.
Great discussion. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week, everybody.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Goodly bios.
Leave.